the question phase, and we can talk this out. So interested to hear your thoughts and opinions on making profit the focus of learning and development, at least that initial focus. When we're starting off on projects, where do we put our emphasis? Any other thoughts on the idea that the majority of what L&D is producing is a complete waste? And I know how aggressive that is. I know that can be insulting because effectively that's saying most of the people on this call, or most of what you're producing for the people on this call, isn't valuable. And it's a tough pill to swallow, especially if you're working hard and feel like you are doing a good job. But I'll go back to that statement from earlier that ultimately it's the organization that gets to make that decision. So I'm interested in your thoughts on any of the content that we've covered so far.
Thank you so much, Clint. Wow, I think that's a lot of information to process, and I would like to thank you one more time for being the guest speaker for our audience. We very much appreciate it, and I hope that you guys enjoyed this session. And I think right now we are ready to switch back to the Q&A session. So, Clint, would you like to read out loud the comments, or how would you like to work?
Yeah, I'll happy to work through them, and I'll sort of work through them from bottom to top. They're sort of interjecting here and bouncing all over the place, but I'll work through them. And you said thanks for the provoking webinar. Absolutely, and there's no question that even some of the way that I phrase things in here are intended to provoke a response, and some of that response is emotional, some of it is more scientific from the people that are participating, but it's absolutely to provoke that response. And when people push back and say, hold on a second, actually we are producing results, that's a great conversation to have. Either that conversation becomes a demonstration of the results that are being produced, or a demonstration that they're not producing as many results as they actually want to, or believe that they're producing. So yeah, thanks for calling that out. It is absolutely the intent is to provoke a little bit of discussion and objection. I certainly don't know everything, and your opinions matter in this type of conversation as much as anything. Virginia, you asked about the downward spiral diagram, and that I said we don't get results. How would I define results? I would define them as profit, but obviously we can't always get that clear. So I would say that we need to define results from the perspective of the business, which means the business needs to define what the results should be and how they should be measured. We work backwards at this often, right? If you go to learn to be an instructional designer, that's the intent. You want to be an instructional designer, you get asked to design something, you design it. But if you're a team of one, or you don't have a leader of the L&D team that can support sussing out what the business objective is, then as an instructional designer or e-learning developer, you need to go and do that. And so really the two questions that we want to ask is, what is the result that we're trying to change? How does it align with profit? Sorry, that's as one question. And then the second question becomes, how are we going to measure the results? And part of that is, who is going to measure the results? The business leaders, the functional leaders, have always been and will always be most responsible for the results of the organization. But when we don't define that up front, we put L&D in a position where we're going to have to define the results, and it's the wrong way to do it. So when I define results, I'm talking about what the business wants, or what the leaders within the business want. We may produce something, but if it's not what they want, it doesn't matter. Moving on up through the list, I know this came from a little bit earlier, so I'm just trying to get these by timestamp. Comment from Brad that it's the realization that it isn't working that is the first step to getting better. Absolutely, I think that's a big part of it, and into that echo chamber sort of effect where we're all L&D people with L&D people talking about L&D things and how great we are. That puts us sort of in a bad spot. We have to be willing to say, honestly, whether or not we're actually getting results, and whether the organization, or ask the organization whether or not they believe we're getting results, and respond to that. Comment from Roy here. Do I have any examples of companies that have shown that L&D has improved profitability? It depends on if we're looking at L&D collectively, like over the year, what is the budget of L&D, and did we get an ROI on that? I can't say that I have a good example of that, but certainly have good examples of individual training initiatives that have been really successful. Working with a company called Bison Transport, really great organization. They wanted to improve how frequently they showed up on time when they were delivering freight, as well as customer service when they weren't able to deliver on time. And originally that became, can we just produce a job aid? And through discussions with the stakeholders there, we discovered that nobody actually knew what the processes were. They had some really loosely defined expectations, but nobody knew what the actual process was and what they needed to do when something happened, who was responsible, when they were responsible. And so that became a process of actually developing the procedures, training out those procedures, largely through e-learning, but then also through group discussions that followed when late deliveries occurred. And so they were actually taking real situations and having team discussions with them afterwards to keep those procedures alive. So that's one example. I'm sure there's lots of examples on here. We could talk about that for a long time. But I don't have a real good example of an organization that would quantifiably year over year be able to show the ROI of their L&D team. Next up, another comment from Virginia. How would an L&D result be defined if L&D was focused on profit? I think they're still defined the same way as we might define them now. If we're having that conversation with leaders up front and we're determining what the measurement should be, we can still have measurements that aren't profit. The emphasis here is that we start at profit and we've always got a line to profit. And that is as much about just making sure that we have the right focus, but also communicating to the rest of the organization that we have the right focus. We may not be able to explicitly state this is how much profit a particular project or even a particular year that L&D has produced. But having that focus changes the way that the team members within L&D approach their work, as well as the way that the rest of the organization might look at L&D. Next, we've got from Anne again. It's good, love the sentence, don't believe in your own hype. It is important to take a step back. Yeah, absolutely, thanks very much for that, Anne. Moving on to comment from Kara. Any data supporting evidence or research you can share? I guess I'd be looking for specifics on what you're looking for data or evidence regarding. So if you don't mind jumping in with that. And then Alice, you've said, I feel like the L&D puzzle is a chicken and egg thing. Orgs don't want to give you money until you prove results, but you can't deliver results without money. Frustrating. Yes, 100%. And this is a conversation that the L&D community has all of the time. How do we produce results when we can't get the support to produce those results? I mean, it's like trying to get a job where you need to have 10 years in management to get a management job. Well, hold on a second. Those two things don't work together. So this is what I'll say to this. Two sort of small notions here. One is get results first. And typically that means you're going to have to pick the thing that is most easily demonstratable. So if you're a sales organization, finding a way to influence sales or finding a way to influence customer service, but it needs to be a metric that you can actually demonstrate. So getting the small win through something like that. And then of course, making sure that you win. So pick something small. If there's a project that's going to take 6 months to build, it's going to be difficult to get the budget for that if that's the thing that you're trying to prove your worth with. Like any team member in the organization trying to show that they are capable, the organization isn't just going to hand over the keys and say, hey, you're the CEO, good luck. It's always about proving the worth, proving it over time, and continually getting those positive results through a series of small interventions, and then start asking for and working towards those bigger interventions that may be more difficult to demonstrate the overall worth of. Maybe you don't have a great customer service metric, for example, and you have a massive customer service program. That's not the right place to start, but you can get there if you prove the worth on a number of other projects and get the goodwill that's required to get the support for that type of project. Move on to Bradley has a comment here. Make your required learning, i.e. safety, compliance, outstanding. Yeah, so there's a couple of lines of thought on this, Bradley, and that's that safety and compliance training is probably actually the thing that L&D does best. And as much as people hate it, we provide value to the organization by making these things happen. Like if the only thing we need is a check mark that says people did the training, we can get that done. And in some cases, legally, we have to do that. The question now becomes, because we know we're going to get these projects, how much time should we invest in them? How much value should we put in them? And the two lines of thought that I was putting in this Bradley, is one line of thought says, don't put a ton of effort into them because we just need the check mark anyways, and use that time elsewhere that is in something that's going to be more valuable. At the same time, we know we're going to get these ones, so that could potentially be our opportunity to prove the value. But that has to happen in a situation where the organization is measuring the value that's happening, not just the check mark. Question, Alice, you had asked about what the training transfer book I mentioned was. It's called Beyond the Transfer of Training, and the author is Mary L. Broad. I'll put her name actually in the comments here. Fantastic book, absolutely worth reading, and literally pages upon pages of pre and post learning interventions that that you can use to improve the organization. Feel free, you can reach out to me anytime by email at clint@elearningalchemy.com. But I'm very active on Twitter as well as LinkedIn. If you're a Twitter person, the private messages, I just get blown up by those, so I essentially ignore them. I'll flip through them sometimes, but irregularly. But LinkedIn is a fantastic way to reach out. It's where the L&D Scenes comic series gets posted. We're just about to post scene number 100 and the book to follow. So that's a great way to reach out, and love having these conversations, and would be happy to pick this up again online.
I think that we've covered all the questions for today's Q&A session. Thanks a lot, Clint, for doing that. And I think at this point we are ready to wrap up. I would like to thank everyone for tuning in today for this very special webinar about how to start getting results from e-learning. And I would like to thank you, Clint, for being our presenter today.
Well, thank you very much. And to be honest, this is the first time as a webinar I've participated in a conversation like this. So usually this is done live, which is a different dynamic certainly. So I really appreciate everyone chiming in with their thoughts and being willing to object and being willing to ask questions. That obviously adds value to this. I can throw out ideas, or I can throw out my thoughts and opinions, but unless it's aligned with what the people on the call are feeling and asking, then there's no point in doing it. Like it has to be valuable to this group. So thank you very much for the questions and the comments as we've gone.
Thanks a lot. So I will close the webinar right now, and I will wish everyone a wonderful day, and we'll see you at the next webinar. Bye, everybody. Bye, Clint.
Take care.